The smell hit me first. Expensive cologne mixed with something else I couldn't quite place, something that didn't belong in my house at 3 in the morning. I'm Jack Baker, marine engineer, fixer of broken things. At 38, I've learned to trust my instincts, especially when they're screaming that something's wrong. Tonight, standing in my own kitchen with a glass of water, those instincts were howling. Maggie's heels clicked against the hardwood as she crept through the front door, my wife of 15 years thinking she was being quiet. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman who could negotiate million-dollar contracts but couldn't figure out how to walk silently in her own house. "Working late again?" I called out, not bothering to hide the sarcasm. She froze in the hallway. Even in the dim light, I could see her shoulders tense. "Jack, what are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep." Funny thing about empty beds, they're not very comfortable. Maggie stepped into the kitchen, and I got a good look at her. Hair slightly mussed, lipstick gone, that expensive dress wrinkled in ways that told a story I didn't want to read. But I was going to read it anyway. "I told you the Morrison case is demanding. Brett has us working around the clock." Brett, her boss, the man I'd met exactly twice at office parties, both times walking away feeling like I'd been measured and found wanting. Brett Garris with his perfect teeth and his corner office, and his habit of calling everyone champ like he was doing them a favor. "Must be some case," I said, setting my glass down harder than necessary. "Important enough to work through dinner again." "Don't start, Jack. I'm exhausted." "I bet you are." The words hung between us like smoke. Maggie's eyes flashed. Anger, guilt, defiance, all mixed together in a cocktail I'd been tasting for months. "What's that supposed to mean?" I could have backed down, could have made some joke about how hard she'd been working, kissed her forehead, and gone back to bed. Could have pretended I hadn't noticed the hotel receipt that fell out of her purse last week, or the new lingerie that never made an appearance at home, or the way she'd started guarding her phone like state secrets. Instead, I smiled. Not a nice smile. It means I'm done pretending, Maggie. I'm done with the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in working weekends. I'm done with whatever game you think you're playing. Her face went white, then red. "Game? You think my career is a game?" "Your career? No. Your affair? Absolutely." The kitchen went dead silent. Even the refrigerator seems to hold its breath. Maggie's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on a dock. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Marriott downtown, room 1247 last Tuesday night. Ring any bells?" I watched the blood drain from her face, watched her scramble for an explanation that wouldn't come. The receipt I'd found had been crumpled at the bottom of her purse, forgotten in her rush to cover her tracks. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain charging a hotel room on our credit card when you were supposedly at the office. I'd love to hear how you explain the champagne and room service for 2. Tears started forming in her eyes, but I was past caring, past the point where her tears could derail my anger. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. The only question is how long it's been going on, and whether you ever plan to tell me." Maggie straightened up, and I saw something shift in her expression. The guilt was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Relief, maybe, or defiance. "You want the truth, Jack? Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Brett." "Yes, it's been going on for 6 months. And no, I wasn't planning to tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this." 6 months. Half a year of lies, of coming home to kiss me with another man's taste still on her lips. Half a year of me making dinner reservations. She'd cancel. Planning weekend trips. She'd sabotage with sudden work emergencies. How exactly did you expect me to react, Maggie? With gratitude? With understanding? Maybe with recognition that we've been growing apart for years, with acknowledgement that you've been so buried in your boats and your project that you barely notice I exist. I notice you plenty. I notice you leaving early and coming home late. I notice you taking phone calls in the bathroom. I noticed you haven't touched me in 3 months because I'm in love with someone else. The words exploded out of her like a confession she'd been holding back for months. They hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known they were coming. Someone who appreciates me. Someone who sees me as more than just a wife who keeps the house clean and the bills paid. Someone who makes me feel alive again. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Someone who makes you feel alive. That's beautiful, Maggie. Really touching. Does Brett know you're still married, or is that another one of your little secrets? He knows, and he doesn't care. He wants me to leave you. Then why haven't you? The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Because it's complicated. The house, our finances, your business. My business that you've been living off of for 15 years. The business that paid for your law school, your car, your designer clothes. That business I contribute to this household too, by screwing your boss and hotel rooms I'm paying for. Maggie's hand cracked across my face before I saw it coming. The slap echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting, tasting blood where my teeth had cut my lip. When I looked at her again, my smile was back, colder this time. Feel better, Jack. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. And you know what? I'm glad you did it, because now we both know exactly where we stand. I walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out the spare keys to her car. Maggie watched confused as I slipped them into my pocket. What are you doing? Taking inventory. Your car is in my name. This house is in my name. Your credit cards are linked to my accounts. Funny how these things work out. You can't what? Can't protect my assets from someone who's been stealing from me for 6 months? Can't secure my property from someone who just admitted she's planning to leave? Panic flickered across her face. Jack, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm being more reasonable than you deserve. Here's what's going to happen, Maggie. You're going to pack a bag. You're going to call Brett and tell him his girlfriend needs a place to stay. And you're going to get the hell out of my house. This is my house too. No, it's not. Check the deed. Check the mortgage. Check any legal document you want. This house belongs to me. Bought with money I earned, maintained with sweat I shed. You're just someone who's been living here. I could see her mind racing, trying to find an angle, a way to turn this around. 15 years of marriage, and she was already calculating her exit strategy. I'll call my lawyer. You do that. Call him from Brett's place. Call him on Brett's dime, because as of right now, you don't have access to mine. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Who are you calling? The credit card company reporting fraudulent charges and requesting new cards. Then the bank putting a hold on our joint accounts pending legal separation. Then a locksmith, because I don't trust you to return your keys, you bastard. Probably. But I'm a bastard who's not going to finance your affair anymore. Maggie stood there for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options. Fight or flight. Stay and try to salvage something, or cut her losses and run. She chose flight. Fine. Fine. You want to play hardball, Jack? You have no idea what you're starting. I know things about your business, about your finances, about corners you've cut that the IRS would love to hear about. Empty threats from an empty woman. But please go ahead and try. I've got 15 years of tax returns that say I'm clean, and a wife who's been committing adultery with her boss. Let's see which one a judge finds more interesting. She turned and stormed toward the stairs, her heels clicking like gunshots on the hardwood. I listened to her moving around upstairs, slamming drawers, throwing things into suitcases. 20 minutes later, she came back down with 2 bags and a face full of rage. "This isn't over, Jack." "Yes, it is. It's been over for 6 months. I'm just catching up." She headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. "You'll regret this. Both of you will." The only thing I regret is not figuring it out sooner. The front door slammed behind her, and suddenly the house was quiet. Quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. I stood in my kitchen, touching my still stinging cheek, and realized something surprising. I felt relieved. The marina at dawn was my cathedral. Fog rolling off the water, seagulls crying overhead, the gentle creak of boats straining against their moorings. This was where I came to think, to plan, to remember who I was before 15 years of marriage tried to sand down my edges. My boat, a 36-foot Krisk I've been restoring for 3 years, bobbed at the end of Pier 7. She wasn't much to look at yet, hull still showing patches of primer, cabin windows fogged with age, but she was mine. Bought with my money, fixed with my hands, improved with my sweat. Unlike some things I could mention, I climbed aboard and headed straight for the cabin. If Maggie wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I didn't just fix boats for a living. I solved problems. And right now, I had a problem that needed solving. My laptop was already set up on the small table, connected to a cellular hotspot that gave me internet access anywhere. One of the advantages of working with marine electronics. You learn to stay connected, even when you're off the grid. First order of business, damage control. I logged into our joint bank account and transferred everything to a new account in my name only. Maggie had beaten me to the punch on one credit card. There was a charge from this morning at some boutique downtown, probably buying clothes to replace whatever she'd left behind in her rush to leave. That was fine. It would be the last charge she ever made on my dime. Next, I called Bob Martinez, my business partner, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. Bob ran the electronics side of our marine repair business, while I handled the mechanical work. More importantly, Bob had a devious mind and a complete lack of moral qualms when it came to people who crossed his friends. "Jack, it's barely 7 in the morning. Someone better be dead or dying." Close. My marriage is officially over. "Man, I'm sorry. What happened?" I gave him the abbreviated version. The affair, the confrontation, Maggie's dramatic exit. Bob listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. Normally, he couldn't go 30 seconds without making a joke or offering commentary. "So, she shacked up with her boss. That's the plan, apparently. And you want to make them both miserable." It wasn't a question. Bob knew me well enough to understand where this was heading. I want to make them understand that actions have consequences. I want them to learn that you don't get to destroy someone's life and then skip off into the sunset together. "What do you need?" This was why I loved Bob. No lectures about moving on. No suggestions about counseling or working things out. Just immediate, practical support for whatever I was planning. Information. Maggie's been sloppy about covering her tracks, but I need to know how deep this goes. I need to know if Brett has a wife, kids, other vulnerabilities. I need to know if there are other people at her firm who might be interested in knowing what their star paralegal has been doing with company time. I can do some digging. What about the technical side? I'm working on that. After I hung up, I pulled out Maggie's old phone, the iPhone she'd replaced 6 months ago and left in a kitchen drawer, forgotten. She'd been careful to delete texts and call logs from her current phone, but people always forgot about their old devices. It took me 20 minutes to crack her passcode. Maggie had always been predictable. She used the same 4-digit combination for everything. Our anniversary, backwards. The irony was almost too perfect. What I found in her message history made my jaw clench. Months of texts between her and Brett, starting professional and gradually becoming personal. then intimate, then explicit. But it wasn't just the affair that made my blood boil. It was what they said about me. Jack's working late again. Sometimes I think he loves those boats more than me. You deserve better than a grease monkey who doesn't appreciate what he has. He's so boring, Brett. All he talks about is engines and repair jobs. When's the last time you went somewhere nice? Did something exciting? Soon, baby. Once you're free of him, we can go anywhere you want. I can't wait. I'm so tired of pretending to be happy with such a small life. A small life. 15 years of marriage. And that's how she saw what we'd built together. The house I'd bought and renovated with my own hands. The business I'd started from nothing and grown into something that supported both of us comfortably. The quiet evenings at home. The weekend trips to antique shops and local festivals. The simple pleasure of cooking dinner together and watching old movies. All of it small, all of it boring, all of it worthless compared to whatever Brett was offering. I kept reading and it got worse. Jack's so clueless. Yesterday he asked if I wanted to go to that seafood place we like for our anniversary. I almost laughed. What did you tell him? That I had to work? He looked so disappointed. It was actually kind of pathetic. You won't have to lie much longer. I know. I just feel bad sometimes. He's not a bad guy, just limited. Don't feel bad for living your life, Maggie. You can't help it if he's not sophisticated enough to keep up with you. Limited. Not sophisticated enough. I'd supported her through law school, encouraged her career, celebrated every promotion and success. I'd been proud of her ambition, her intelligence, her drive, and apparently she'd seen it all as evidence that she was too good for me. The final insult came in a text from just 2 weeks ago. Jack made dinner reservations for Friday, some romantic gesture to reconnect. I told him I had a client meeting. Will you be reconnecting with me instead? Count on it, though. Though I feel a little guilty lying to him. He tries so hard. That's his problem, not yours. A real man wouldn't have to try so hard to keep his woman interested. I set the phone down carefully, afraid that if I gripped it any tighter, I'd crack the screen. A real man, according to Brett Garris, a real man was someone who seduced other men's wives, who built his relationships on lies and betrayal, who measured his worth by his ability to steal what belonged to someone else. While Brett was about to learn what a real man could do when you pushed him too far, I spent the next hour researching Brett Garris online. Social media profiles, professional listings, news articles mentioning his work at the law firm. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd built his career on charm and connections, rather than talent or hard work. Divorced twice, no kids, a string of relationships with younger women who worked for him or with him. In other words, a predator with a pattern. His LinkedIn profile was particularly interesting. Brett made a big deal about his commitment to professional ethics, his mentorship of young legal professionals, his dedication to maintaining the highest standards of conduct in the workplace. I screenshotted everything. By mid-morning, I had a plan, not just for revenge. Revenge was too simple, too crude. What I wanted was justice. I wanted Brett and Maggie to face the consequences of their choices, to understand that their happiness had come at someone else's expense, and to pay a price that matched the damage they'd done. I wanted them to lose everything that mattered to them, the same way they'd tried to take everything that mattered to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Bob. Found some interesting stuff about your boy Brett. Can you meet at the shop this afternoon? I'll be there at 2. Bring coffee and maybe a bottle of something stronger. You're going to need it. I looked out at the water, watching a fishing boat head out for the day's work. The sun was burning off the fog, revealing a clear blue sky that promised good weather ahead. For some people, anyway. For Brett and Maggie, the forecast was about to take a very dark turn. Bob's marine electronics shop occupied a converted warehouse near the old part of the harbor, where working boats still outnumbered pleasure craft. The building looked rough from the outside, weathered concrete walls and small windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. But inside, it was a high-tech paradise. Workbenches lined with computer monitors, shelves stacked with GPS units and fish finders and radar systems, cables and components organized with military precision. Bob himself was the opposite of his workspace: rumpled clothes, graying beard that he trimmed maybe twice a year, coffee-stained t-shirts advertising bands that had broken up before I was born. But his mind was sharp as a scalpel, and his moral flexibility was exactly what I needed right now. "You look like hell," he said when I walked in at 2 o'clock sharp. "Feel worse. What did you find?" Bob gestured to his main computer where multiple browser windows were open. "Your boy Brett is a piece of work. 3 different women have filed complaints against him over the past 5 years, all settled out of court, all sealed with non-disclosure agreements. Sexual harassment, that's my guess, but the details are locked down tight. What I can tell you is that he's got a pattern. Targets women who work for him or with him, usually younger, usually in vulnerable positions. Maggie fits the profile perfectly." I studied the screen, seeing Brett's professional headshot staring back at me. Perfectly styled hair, expensive suit, confident smile. The kind of man who'd never doubted his right to take whatever he wanted. "There's more," Bob continued. His ex-wives both filed restraining orders during their divorce proceedings. Again, details are sealed, but that's not usually about money disputes, so he's got a temper. Seems likely. And here's the interesting part. His current position at the firm is less secure than it appears. There's been talk about a merger with a bigger firm out of Boston. If that goes through, there's going to be a lot of redundancy in the partnership ranks. I felt a spark of interest, meaning Brett's probably feeling pressure to prove his value. Having an affair with a subordinate right now would be career suicide if it came to light. And Maggie doesn't know about the merger. I doubt it. This kind of information doesn't usually trickle down to the paralegal level until it's a done deal. Perfect. Maggie thought she was jumping from a sinking ship to a luxury yacht, but Brett's boat had its own leaks. She just didn't know it yet. What about his personal life? Bob opened another window, showing Brett's Facebook profile. Lives alone in a condo downtown. Expensive place, but he's leveraged to the hilt. 2 car payments, a boat loan, mortgage payments that eat up most of his salary. He's living the lifestyle, but barely affording it. So he needs his job desperately, and he needs to stay out of any scandals that might give the senior partners an excuse to cut him loose. I was starting to see the shape of my strategy. Brett and Maggie had made themselves vulnerable in ways they didn't even realize. Acts. All I had to do was apply pressure in the right places and let their own choices destroy them. "I need you to do something for me, Bob." "Name it." "I need you to clone Maggie's phone. Can you do that remotely?" Bob grinned, and I saw the gleam in his eyes that appeared whenever someone asked him to do something technically challenging and morally questionable. "I can do better than that. I can set up a mirror that copies all her texts and calls in real time. You'll know what she's planning before she does it." "Is that legal?" "Probably not. Do you care?" I thought about Maggie's texts about her calling my life small and boring, about her laughing at my attempts to save our marriage while she was planning our escape. Not even a little bit. Good man. What else? I want to know everything about Brett's routine, where he goes, when he goes there, who he sees. I want to know his habits, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Surveillance. I can set that up too, but it'll take a few days to get everything in place. I've got time. This isn't about quick revenge, Bob. This is about thorough destruction. Bob nodded approvingly. Now you're talking my language. What's the end game here, Jack? What does victory look like? I'd been thinking about that question since I left the marina this morning. What did I want? Maggie back? That ship had sailed the moment she chose Brett over our marriage. Brett fired. That was a start, but not enough. Both of them publicly humiliated. Getting warmer. I want them to lose everything they think they're gaining from this affair. I want Maggie to realize that she traded a good marriage for a man who will throw her away the moment she becomes inconvenient. I want Brett to understand that his actions have consequences, that he can't just take what belongs to other people without paying a price. And then I want them to know that I'm the one who made it happen. I want them to understand that they didn't just cheat on a boring husband. They went to war with someone who fights back. Bob was quiet for a moment, studying my face. You sure about this path, Jack? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. You'll have to live with whatever you do. I'm already living with what they did. At least this way, I'm not the only one suffering. Fair enough. When do we start? We already have. I spent the rest of the afternoon at Bob's shop setting up the technical infrastructure for my campaign against Brett and Maggie. Bob walked me through the phone cloning process, showed me how to access the surveillance data he was collecting, explained the various ways we could gather intelligence without leaving digital fingerprints. It was like planning a military operation, complete with reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, and strategic objectives. The only difference was that instead of capturing territory, I was going to capture the truth about what Brett and Maggie had done, and then use that truth to destroy them. By 6 o'clock, we had the basic framework in place. Within 48 hours, I'd have access to Maggie's communications and Brett's movements. Within a week, I'd know enough about both of them to start applying pressure. One more thing, Bob said as I was getting ready to leave. You might want to think about covering your own tracks. If this goes the way I think it will, they're going to try to retaliate. Make sure your business records are clean, your taxes are up to date, your personal life is bulletproof. Already on it. I've got nothing to hide. Good, because they're going to be looking for ammunition to use against you. Don't give them any. I drove back to the marina as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reflected off the water like fire. My boat looked peaceful in the fading light, a refuge from the chaos that my life had become. But I wasn't looking for peace anymore. I was looking for war. And tomorrow, the battle would begin in earnest. The beauty of modern technology is that it makes surveillance almost effortless. By Thursday morning, Bob's systems were feeding me a steady stream of intelligence about Brett and Maggie's activities. Text messages, phone calls, location data, even photos from social media accounts they thought were private. What I learned in the first 24 hours was both infuriating and useful. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together. Maggie had already started looking at apartments, using Brett's computer to browse rental listings in the upscale part of town. Brett had made reservations at expensive restaurants for the next 3 weekends, apparently planning to wine and dine in his new girlfriend in style. More importantly, they were getting careless. The initial secrecy of their affair was giving way to a kind of giddy overconfidence. They were texting each other constantly, sending photos, making plans without bothering to use code words or cover stories. It was like watching two people who'd never heard of consequences. That was about to change. I started with something simple, a test to see how they'd react to pressure. Brett's expensive BMW was parked in the firm's garage every day from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., protected by security cameras and access cards. But on Thursday night, he drove to a bar called Murphy's to meet some colleagues for drinks. Murphy's parking lot was dark, poorly lit, and completely unmonitored. I waited until Brett was inside, then walked over to his car with a small toolkit and a plant. I didn't damage anything. That would be vandalism, and I wasn't interested in petty crimes. Instead, I loosened the valve stems on all 4 tires just enough to create slow leaks. By morning, his car would be sitting on 4 flat tires with no obvious cause. Then I placed a small tracking device under his rear bumper. Magnetic and waterproof, the kind Bob used to monitor fishing boats. Brett would never know it was there, but I'd know everywhere he went. Finally, I left a note under his windshield wiper. Nothing threatening, nothing that could be traced back to me. Just 8 words in block letters. Some things belong to other people. Brett. The next morning, I was sitting in my truck across the street from the law firm when Brett discovered his flat tires. Even from a distance, I could see his confusion turned to anger as he read my note. He looked around the parking lot like he expected to find me hiding behind a car, then pulled out his phone and made what I assumed was a call to AA. 20 minutes later, Maggie came rushing out of the building to comfort him. She was supposed to be working, but apparently Brett's crisis was more important than her job duties. They stood next to his disabled car, talking intensely, and I could see the paranoia starting to set in. Good. Paranoia was the first stage of the psychological pressure I was planning to apply. When people start looking over their shoulders, they make mistakes, and I was counting on Brett and Maggie to make plenty of mistakes. That afternoon, I moved to the next phase of my plan. I'd spent hours studying the law firm's website, memorizing the names and faces of the senior partners, the associates, the staff. I knew who Brett reported to, who had the power to hire and fire, who took professional ethics seriously. Margaret Thornton, the managing partner, had built her reputation on maintaining the firm's spotless image. She'd written articles about professional conduct, spoken at conferences about workplace harassment, made it clear that she had zero tolerance for behavior that could damage the firm's reputation. She was exactly the person who needed to know about Brett's relationship with Maggie. I couldn't contact her directly, that would be too obvious, but I could plant seeds that would eventually grow into the kind of investigation that would expose everything. I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to the firm's ethics hotline. I'm concerned about a situation involving a senior associate and a paralegal at your firm. I've observed behavior that seems inappropriate for a professional workplace, including extended private meetings, personal gifts, and what appears to be a romantic relationship between a supervisor and subordinate. I'm not comfortable providing my name, but I think someone should look into the conduct of Brett Garris and Maggie Baker. The firm's reputation for ethical behavior is too important to risk. Short, factual, impossible to ignore. The kind of complaint that would land on Margaret Thornton's desk within hours and start an internal investigation within days. But I wasn't done. Brett had made this personal when he decided to steal my wife, and I was going to return the favor. I'd learned from my surveillance that Brett had a routine. Every Friday night, he went to an upscale gym downtown, the kind of place where lawyers and bankers went to network while they exercised. He'd spend an hour on the treadmill, another hour lifting weights, then hit the steam room before heading home. This Friday, I was waiting for him. I joined the gym that morning, paying the exorbitant monthly fee without blinking. The membership gave me access to all the facilities, including the steam room, where Brett liked to relax after his workouts. I timed my arrival perfectly. Brett was already in the steam room when I walked in, towel around his waist, eyes closed, completely relaxed. He didn't notice me at first, which gave me a chance to study him up close. He was smaller than I'd expected. Not short, but not particularly tall either. Soft around the middle despite his gym membership. Thinning hair that he disguised with expensive styling products. The kind of man who looked impressive in a suit, but ordinary without one. This was the man Maggie had chosen over me. This was the sophisticated, exciting alternative to my boring, limited life. "Excuse me," I said, settling onto the bench across from him. "Aren't you Brett Garris?" His eyes snapped open, and I saw the moment of confusion as he tried to place me. We'd met exactly twice, both times briefly, both times in social situations where I'd been introduced as Maggie's husband. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Jack Baker, Maggie's husband. We met at your firm's Christmas party last year." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. In the enclosed space of the steam room, I could see sweat that had nothing to do with the heat beating on his forehead. "Oh, right. Jack, how are you?" "I'm great, Brett. Really great. Thanks for asking." I let the silence stretch between us, watching him squirm. He was trying to figure out how much I knew, whether this was a coincidence or a confrontation, what I might do next. "How's Maggie?" he asked finally, his voice carefully neutral. "She's fine, staying with a friend while we work through some marital issues. You know how it is. Sometimes couples need a little space to figure things out, right?" "Of course. I hope everything works out for you both." "Oh, I'm sure it will. These things have a way of resolving themselves, don't they? The truth always comes out eventually." Brett was sweating heavily now, and not from the steam. He kept glancing toward the door like he was calculating whether he could make it out before I said something more direct. "Actually, Brett, I'm glad I ran into you. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for taking such good care of Maggie at work? All those late nights, all those weekend projects, all that personal attention. It's nice to know that her boss is so invested in her success." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The firm demands a lot from our staff." "I'm sure it does. And I'm sure Maggie appreciates everything you've done for her, all the opportunities you've given her, all the new experiences." I stood up, letting my towel fall open, just enough to reveal that I was in considerably better shape than he was. 15 years of physical labor had given me muscles that no amount of gym membership could duplicate. "Well, I should let you get back to your relaxation. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Brett, and give my regards to Maggie when you see her." I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Brett, you might want to be more careful where you park your car. This city can be rough on expensive vehicles." I left him sitting there in the steam, sweating and shaking, and finally beginning to understand that his affair was going to cost him more than he'd bargained for. Phase 1 was complete. Brett and Maggie now knew they were being watched, that their secret wasn't as secret as they'd thought, that someone was paying attention to their choices. But this was just the beginning. I had weeks of intelligence gathering ahead of me, dozens of pressure points to exploit, and a growing understanding of exactly how to destroy them both. They had wanted excitement in their lives. They'd wanted drama and passion and consequences. They were about to get more of all three than they could handle. By the following Monday, the psychological pressure was starting to show. Bob's surveillance equipment was feeding me a constant stream of intelligence, and what I saw was two people beginning to crack under the strain of paranoia. Brett had his car towed to 3 different mechanics over the weekend, trying to figure out what had caused his mysterious tire problem. When they all told him there was nothing mechanically wrong, he'd started looking over his shoulder everywhere he went. The tracking device I'd planted was showing me his movements in real time, erratic routes to and from work, frequent stops to check his surroundings, obvious attempts to see if he was being followed. Maggie was handling the pressure even worse. The phone cloning Bob had set up was giving me access to her text messages, and that painted a picture of a woman who is starting to realize that her carefully planned escape might not be as smooth as she'd expected. "Brett, I'm scared. What if Jack knows more than he's letting on?" "He doesn't know anything concrete. He's just fishing." "Then why did he show up at your gym? Why did he say those things about taking care of me?" "Because he's desperate. Men like Jack don't know how to lose gracefully. What if he tries to cause problems at work?" "He won't. He's not that smart." That last text made me smile. Brett was about to learn exactly how smart I could be when properly motivated. The ethics complaint I'd filed was already working its way through the firm's internal processes. I knew this because Margaret Thornton had scheduled a private meeting with Brett for Wednesday afternoon. The kind of meeting that didn't appear on public calendars, but showed up in the surveillance data Bob was collecting from the firm's computer systems. But I wasn't content to wait for the investigation to run its course. I wanted to apply more immediate pressure, to make Brett and Maggie understand that their actions were going to have consequences they hadn't anticipated. Tuesday morning, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. Brett's routine was predictable. Coffee at the same shop every morning, lunch at the same restaurant most days, drinks at Murphy's every Thursday night. He was a creature of habit, which made him easy to track and even easier to manipulate. I started with his morning coffee. The shop he frequented was a trendy place downtown, the kind where lawyers and bankers gathered to see and be seen before heading to their offices. I arrived early and positioned myself at a table with a clear view of the entrance. Brett walked in at exactly 8:15, just like he had every day for the past week. He ordered his usual large cappuccino, extra shot, no sugar, and was waiting for his drink when I approached the counter. "Brett, what a coincidence!" He spun around, and I saw the flash of fear in his eyes before he managed to compose his expression. "Jack, hi. What are you doing downtown so early?" "Meeting with a potential client. Big yacht restoration project. You know how it is. The early bird gets the worm." I ordered my own coffee, making sure to stand close enough that our conversation would seem natural to anyone watching. "How's business?" Brett asked, clearly trying to fill the awkward silence. "Booming. Funny thing about being good at what you do, word gets around. People start to trust you with their most valuable possessions." Brett's coffee was ready, but he hesitated to take it, like accepting the drink would mean committing to continue our conversation. "That's great, Jack. Really great. Of course, trust is a fragile thing, isn't it? Takes years to build, seconds to destroy. One mistake, one moment of poor judgment, and suddenly everyone's questioning everything they thought they knew about you." I collected my coffee and smiled at Brett like we were old friends sharing a pleasant chat. "Anyway, I should let you get to work. Big day ahead, I'm sure. Important meetings, difficult decisions, that sort of thing." I walked away before he could respond, but I could feel his eyes on my back as I left the coffee shop. Another seed of paranoia planted. Another reminder that his secret wasn't as secure as he'd thought. But I wasn't done with Brett for the day. That afternoon, I drove to his office building and parked across the street with a clear view of the parking garage entrance. The tracking device on his car told me he was still inside, probably preparing for his meeting with Margaret Thornton. At 4:30, Brett's BMW emerged from the garage, moving faster than usual. Instead of heading home or to his usual haunts, he drove straight to a bar I'd never seen him visit before, a dive place on the wrong side of town where lawyers definitely didn't go to network. I followed at a distance, curious about this deviation from his normal routine. Brett parked in the shadows behind the building and sat in his car for 10 minutes before finally going inside. Through the bar's grimy windows, I could see him hunched over a drink in the darkest corner booth, phone pressed to his ear. Even from outside, his body language screamed stress and desperation. My own phone buzzed with a text message from Maggie to Brett, intercepted by Bob's cloning system. "How did the meeting go? Please tell me everything's okay." Brett's response came a few minutes later. "We need to talk, not over the phone. Meet me at my place in an hour. You're scaring me." "What happened? Just come over, and Maggie, we might need to reconsider our timeline." Perfect. The pressure was working exactly as I'd hoped. Brett was starting to realize that his affair might cost him his career, and Maggie was beginning to understand that her knight in shining armor might not be able to rescue her after all. I drove back to the marina, satisfied with the day's work. But as I was settling into my boat's cabin with a beer and a sandwich, my phone rang. "Jack, it's your son Mike, my older boy. 22 years old and finishing his senior year at college. Smart kid, good instincts, the kind of son any father would be proud of, which made this conversation infinitely more difficult." "Hey Mike, how's school?" "School's fine, Dad. I'm calling about Mom." Of course he was. I've been wondering when Maggie would involve the kids in our situation when she tried to use them as weapons or allies or shields. "What about her?" "She called me yesterday. She's pretty upset about whatever's happening between you two. She says you threw her out of the house, cut off her credit cards, Won't even talk to her about working things out. I could hear the confusion in Mike's voice, the desire to understand what had gone wrong between his parents. He'd grown up thinking Maggie and I had a solid marriage, that we were a team, that we'd weather any storm together. He had no idea that his mother had been planning to abandon that team for months. Mike, there are things about this situation that you don't understand. Adult things. Marriage things. Then explain them to me. I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I can handle whatever's going on. Could he? Could I tell my son that his mother had been cheating on me? That she'd called our life together small and boring? That she'd been planning to leave without even discussing it with me first? Your mother and I are having some serious problems. Problems that can't be fixed with a conversation or a counseling session. Sometimes marriages just end. But you love each other. You've always loved each other. The pain in his voice was like a knife in my chest. Mike had built his understanding of relationships on the foundation of what he thought his parents had together. Learning that it was all an illusion was going to shatter something fundamental in his worldview. I love your mother, Mike. I've loved her for 15 years, but love isn't always enough. What does that mean? It means that sometimes people change. Sometimes they decide they want different things, different lives. Sometimes they make choices that can't be undone. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mike spoke again, his voice was smaller, younger. Is there anything I can do? Anything Tommy and I can do? Tommy was my younger son, 19 and still finding his way in the world. Both boys were good kids, caught in the middle of something they didn't create and couldn't fix. Just love us both, Mike. Whatever happens between your mother and me, we both love you and Tommy more than anything in the world. That will never change. Okay, Dad, but if there's a chance to work things out, will you try for us? I closed my eyes, thinking about Maggie's texts, about her plans with Brett, about the way she'd laughed at my attempts to save our marriage. If there's a real chance, son, if there's something genuine to work with. But I won't pretend everything's fine when it's not. I won't lie to you or to myself about what's really happening here. After Mike hung up, I sat in my boat's cabin staring out at the dark water. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Maybe I should call Maggie, try to talk things through, see if there was some way to salvage our marriage. Then my phone buzzed with another intercepted text from Maggie to Brett. Jack's son called him. I think the kids might be able to pressure him into backing down. Maybe we don't have to change our plans after all. And just like that, any doubt I might have had evaporated. Maggie wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was looking for leverage. She was willing to use our children as tools to manipulate me into accepting her betrayal. That crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. If Maggie wanted to play dirty, if she wanted to drag our kids into this mess, then she was about to learn that I could play dirtier than she'd ever imagined. The gloves were officially off. Wednesday morning brought news that changed everything. Bob called me at 7 a.m., his voice tight with excitement and something that might have been concern. Jack, you need to get down here now. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. But you're going to want to see this in person. I drove to Bob's shop through the early morning traffic, my mind racing through possibilities. So, the surveillance equipment had been working perfectly, feeding us a steady stream of intelligence about Brett and Maggie's activities. What could have happened overnight that required an emergency meeting? Bob was waiting for me with coffee and a grim smile. His computer screens were lit up with data, text messages, emails, location tracking, even some photos that looked like they'd been taken with a long-range lens. Margaret Thornton didn't waste any time, Bob said without preamble. Yesterday's meeting with Brett was just the beginning. She's launched a full internal investigation, and she's being very thorough about it. He pulled up a series of emails on his main monitor. These are from the firm's internal server. Thornton has requested Brett's phone records, his computer usage logs, his expense reports for the past 6 months. She's also scheduled interviews with every paralegal and associate who's worked with him recently, including Maggie. Especially Maggie. And here's the beautiful part. Neither of them knows how deep this investigation is going to go. They think it's just a routine inquiry into workplace conduct. They have no idea that Thornton is treating this like a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. I studied the emails, seeing the methodical approach Margaret Thornton was taking. She wasn't just looking into Brett's relationship with Maggie. She was examining his entire professional history, looking for patterns, building a comprehensive case. There's more, Bob continued. Brett's been making some very interesting phone calls since yesterday's meeting, including this one. He played an audio file that his surveillance equipment had captured. Brett's voice, stressed and angry, talking to someone I didn't recognize. "I need you to make this go away, David. Whatever it costs, whatever you have to do, this investigation could destroy me. Brett, you know I can't interfere with internal firm business. If Thornton's conducting an investigation, there's nothing I can do to stop it. Then help me control the narrative. Help me make sure the right story gets told." What story is that? That this is all a misunderstanding. That any relationship I might have had with Maggie was consensual, professional, completely appropriate. Was it? There was a long pause before Brett answered. Of course it was. But his voice carried no conviction. And even through the poor audio quality, I could hear the lie. "There's something else," Bob said, switching to another screen. "Maggie's been doing some research of her own. Look at her browser history from last night." The list of websites made my blood run cold. Divorce lawyers, alimony calculators, articles about spousal support and property division. But worse than that were the searches about me, my business, my finances, my professional reputation. She was building a case against me, gathering ammunition for a divorce battle I hadn't even known was coming. "She's planning to take you to the cleaners, Jack, and she's doing it while living with the man she cheated with." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about Maggie trying to destroy my life so she could start a new one with Brett, funded by everything I'd worked for over the past 15 years. "Show me everything," I said. 2 hours, Bob walked me through the intelligence he'd gathered. Text messages between Maggie and Brett discussing their strategy for the divorce, emails to lawyers asking about ways to maximize her settlement, even conversations about how to portray me as an abusive husband who'd driven her into another man's arms. It was a comprehensive plan to destroy me financially and personally, to paint me as the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was the same man who'd let Maggie walk all over him for months, who'd accepted her lies and excuses, who tried to save a marriage that was already dead. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "I need you to prepare a complete dossier," I told Bob. "Everything we have on both of them, text messages, photos, financial records, location data, the works. I want a timeline of their affair, evidence of their plans, proof of everything they've done." "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to end this war, before it really starts." That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls that would change the everything. The first was to Margaret Thornton's office. I identified myself as Maggie's husband and requested a meeting to discuss information relevant to her investigation of Brett Garris. Her assistant tried to put me off, but I made it clear that what I had to share could protect the firm from potential liability. I had an appointment for Friday morning. The second call was to the best divorce attorney in the city, a woman named Patricia Williams, who had a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. I explained my situation briefly and scheduled a consultation for Thursday afternoon. The third call was the most important one. I dialed Maggie's number, knowing she was at work, knowing she'd be surrounded by colleagues who might overhear our conversation. "Jack, why are you calling me at the office?" "Because we need to talk, Maggie, and I want to make sure you're in a public place when we do it." "I can't talk right now, I'm working." "No, you're not. You're planning. You're strategizing. You're figuring out how to destroy me so you can run off with your boyfriend without any financial consequences." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The divorce lawyers, the asset searches, the character assassination you're planning. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" "Jack, you're being paranoid. I'm not planning anything." "Then explain the browser history on your laptop. Explain the emails to lawyers. Explain the text messages where you and Brett discuss how to maximize your settlement." Another long silence. When Maggie spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculated. "How did you get access to my computer?" "Does it matter? The point is, I know what you're planning, and I know what you've been doing. All of it, Maggie. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of the past 6 months." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Then let me tell you about the Marriott downtown, room 1247. Let me tell you about the company credit card you used to pay for dinner at Romano's last week. Let me tell you about the afternoon you spent at Brett's condo when you were supposed to be in court." I could hear her breathing getting faster. Could practically feel her panic through the phone. "What do you want, Jack?" "I want you to understand that this game you're playing has rules. And one of those rules is that actions have consequences. You wanted out of our marriage. Fine, you're out. But you don't get to destroy me on your way to your new life. You can't stop me from filing for divorce. I'm not going to stop you. I'm going to beat you to it. By the time you and your lawyer figure out your strategy, I'll already have filed papers that tell the real story of why our marriage ended." "You wouldn't dare." "Maggie, I've spent the past week learning things about you and Brett that would make your mother weep. I've got evidence that would make a judge laugh at any claim you might make about being the injured party in this divorce. I've got proof of adultery, proof of fraud, proof of conspiracy to commit financial harm." "That's not 'you can't prove.' I can prove everything, and I will if you force me to, but I'm willing to make you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The kind where you walk away from this marriage with your dignity intact. Where you don't try to take half of everything I've built. Where you don't drag our kids through a messy divorce battle that will destroy their relationship with both of us." "And if I don't agree, then I release everything I know to your boss, your colleagues, your family, and the court. I let the whole world see exactly what kind of person you really are." There was a long pause. I could hear office noises in the background, phones ringing, people talking, the normal sounds of a workplace where Maggie was trying to maintain her professional reputation. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow night. After that, I start making phone calls." I hung up before she could respond, then sat back in my truck and tried to process what I'd just done. For months, I've been reactive, responding to Maggie's lies and betrayals, trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Now, for the first time, I was taking control of the situation. It felt good. It felt right. It felt like something I should have done months ago. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Brett. We need to talk. Tonight. Murphy's Bar, 8 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "See you there." It was time for the final confrontation. Time to look Brett Garris in the eye and show him exactly what happened when you tried to steal another man's life. Time to finish what he'd started. Murphy's Bar at 8 p.m. was exactly what I had expected. Dimly lit, half empty, the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Brett was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall and a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. He looked like hell. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confident smile replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man who hadn't slept in days. The psychological pressure I'd been applying was working better than I'd hoped. "Jack, thanks for coming." I slid into the booth across from him, noting the way his hands shook slightly as he lifted his whiskey glass. Whatever confidence Brett had possessed when he'd started his affair with my wife was long gone, replaced by the kind of desperation that made men dangerous. He said we needed to talk, so talk. Brett took a long sip of his drink, gathering his courage. This has gone far enough. Whatever game you think you're playing, it needs to stop. Game? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Brett, this isn't a game. This is my life you've been screwing with for the past 6 months. Look, I know you're angry. I understand why. But Maggie and I, what we have is real. It's not some casual fling or meaningless affair. We love each other. Congratulations. I'm sure that makes it all better. I'm trying to be reasonable here, Jack. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Everyone? You mean you, me, and the wife you stole? That everyone? Brett's jaw tightened. I didn't steal anything. Maggie made her own choice. Did she? Or did you manipulate a woman who is feeling neglected, who is vulnerable, who is looking for someone to make her feel special again? That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen, Brett? Walk me through it. Explain to me how a married woman ends up in hotel rooms with her boss, paying for the privilege with her husband's credit cards. Brett was quiet for a long moment, staring into his drink like it might contain answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Things just developed. We were working late, spending time together, getting to know each other. One thing led to another. One thing led to another. That's your explanation for destroying a 15-year marriage? Your marriage was already in trouble, Jack. Maggie was unhappy long before I came along. Maybe she was. Maybe I could have done things differently, been a better husband, paid more attention to what she needed. But that doesn't give you the right to take advantage of the situation. Brett leaned forward, and I saw a flash of his old arrogance. Take advantage. I gave Maggie something you never could. I made her feel alive again. Made her remember what it was like to be desired, to be appreciated. You made her feel like a cheater and a liar. You made her sneak around, hide her phone, lie to her husband and children. You turned her into someone she never wanted to be. She wanted to be with me. She wanted to escape from problems in her marriage. You were just a convenient exit door. Brett's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Then explain why she's been researching divorce lawyers behind your back. Explain why she's been calculating how much money she can take from me in a settlement. Explain why she's been planning her financial future like it doesn't include you. The color drained from Brett's face. That's not. She wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't lie to you the same way she lied to me. Wouldn't use you the same way she used me. Brett, if Maggie is willing to betray a 15-year marriage, what makes you think she won't betray a 6-month affair? I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, the realization that maybe he didn't know Maggie as well as he thought. You're lying. Am I? Ask her about the emails to Patricia Williams. Ask her about the asset searches she's been running on my business. Ask her about the exit strategy she's been developing that doesn't seem to include you. Brett was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd told him. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, less certain. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything between us. This war you've been waging against me, against both of us, it has to stop. War? Brett, you haven't seen war yet. You've seen me being polite. Polite? You've been stalking me, harassing me, interfering with my career. I've been applying consequences to your choices. There's a difference. Margaret Thornton called me into her office yesterday. She's launching an investigation into my conduct, my relationship with Maggie, my entire professional history. That was you, wasn't it? That was you, Brett. That was the natural result of a senior associate having an affair with a subordinate. Did you really think there wouldn't be professional consequences? I could lose my job. You should lose your job. You violated every ethical standard your profession claims to uphold. You abused your position of authority to seduce a married woman who worked for you. You used company resources to facilitate your affair. You've created a liability nightmare for your firm. Brett finished his whiskey and signaled for another. What do you want, Jack? What's it going to take to make this stop? I want you to understand that your actions have consequences. I want you to realize that you can't just take whatever you want without paying a price. I want you to learn that some things, some people, don't belong to you. And then what? You get Maggie back? I laughed, and this time there was genuine humor in it. Brett, I don't want Maggie back. You can have her. You can have her lies, her manipulation, her willingness to betray anyone who trusts her. You can have her plans to use you until someone better comes along, then throw you away like yesterday's newspaper. That's not who she is. That's exactly who she is. And deep down, you know it. That's why you're sitting here trying to negotiate with me instead of fighting for the woman you claim to love. Brett's second whiskey arrived, and he drank half of it in one swallow. So, what happens now? Now you both live with the choices you've made. Maggie files for divorce, and I don't contest it as long as she doesn't try to take more than she's entitled to. You probably lose your job when Fortin's investigation concludes. You both start over, together or separately, with the knowledge that everyone in your professional and social circles knows exactly what kind of people you are. That's it. That's your revenge. Brett, revenge would be destroying you completely. Revenge would be making sure you never worked as a lawyer again, that Maggie never found another job, that both of your reputations were so thoroughly ruined that you'd have to leave town to escape the shame. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. This isn't revenge. This is justice. This is you learning that actions have consequences, that you can't build your happiness on someone else's pain without paying a price. Brett stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. And if we accept that, if we don't fight back, don't try to retaliate, then this ends here. You both move on with your lives, and I move on with mine. Clean break, minimal damage. Everyone gets to keep their dignity. And if we don't accept it, I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then you find out what I'm really capable of when someone threatens everything I've worked for. Then you discover that the evidence I've gathered so far is just the tip of the iceberg. Then you learn that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous opponent you'll ever face. Brett finished his drink and stood up, his movements unsteady. I'll talk to Maggie. You do that. You tell her that she has until tomorrow night to make her choice. Clean divorce with dignity intact, or total war with everything exposed. And Brett, I called as he headed for the door. Next time you want to steal another man's wife, make sure you pick one who's actually worth the price you're going to pay. He left without responding, and I sat alone in the dim bar, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. That would take time to rebuild. Not satisfaction. The damage to my life was too extensive for that. But peace. The calm that comes from finally taking control of a situation that had been controlling you. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maggie. Brett told me about your conversation. We need to talk. I typed back, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Your choice where, but make it public. And, Maggie, come prepared to sign papers. The war was almost over. One way or another, tomorrow night would end it. And for the first time in months, I was looking forward to.